In Lochdubh, a sheepdog trial is only a game if you are not the one holding the whistle. On the lower grazing field beside the burn, where muddy boots, folding chairs and thermos tea formed a sort of Highland parliament, everyone claimed they had come merely to enjoy the morning. Nobody believed this. Crofters who had not spoken above a grunt all week became sharp-eyed judges of another man's dog. Wives pretended not to count points. Children hoped for bridies. Dogs, wiser than humans in most matters, knew perfectly well that pride had a smell. And among the whistles, clipped commands, and careful smiles, one note sounded slightly wrong. So settle in by the fire and listen closely. In Lochdubh, the trouble often begins before anyone admits there is trouble at all. Chapter 1. The Lower Field. The first trouble at Lochdubh's annual sheepdog trial was parking. By 9:30, the lower road beside the grazing field had become a crooked exhibition of Highland transport. Land Rovers, vans, one tractor, and a red hatchback abandoned across the gate with the boldness of someone who had never reversed under public judgment. Hamish Macbeth stood looking at it with his hands in his pockets. "It belongs to Mrs. Gilchrist's niece," said Mrs. Wellington. "She teaches yoga in Inverness." "Then she'll ken about balance," said Hamish. "She knows nothing about gates." Beyond the gate, the trial field spread beside the burn, still wet from the night's rain. Sheep bunched near the hurdles. Folding chairs sank gently into the mud. Thermos flasks appeared from bags like sacred objects. Crofters who claimed not to care who won had arrived early enough to inspect every dog with merciless attention. Mrs. Patel had set up a folding table with tea, bridies, and a vegetable soup that already had 3 men pretending they had come for lunch rather than victory. "You will have tea, Hamish," she said. "I'm meant to be keeping order. That is why you require tea." He accepted the cup. Lugs, who had been told twice not to wander onto the field, sat beside him and watched the sheep with wounded ambition. "You are not entering," Hamish told him. Lugs looked away, offended by small-minded rules. The visiting judge arrived in a pale green estate car. Annalise Kerr stepped out in waterproof trousers, boots, and a dark waxed jacket, carrying a notebook under one arm. She had a calm face, and the look of a woman who noticed what people hoped would pass unseen. "Miss Kerr," said Hamish, "you're the constable?" "When required. And today, parking, order, and preventing my dog from becoming a competitor." Her mouth almost smiled. Then her eyes moved past him to the handlers. A man near the tent tightened a lead too quickly. His dog lowered its head. "You're judging the runs?" Hamish asked. "And observing welfare standards. That'll win you friends." "I am not here for friends," she said. "A good dog should not have to be afraid to look obedient." Before Hamish could answer, Fergus Beaton came across the grass, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, and smiling as if the day belonged partly to him. At his heel walked a handsome black-and-white collie, still as a shadow. "Miss Kerr," he said warmly. "Fergus Beaton. We're honoured." "I've heard of your kennels," said Annalise. "All good things, I hope." "Some good." Fergus's smile held, but his hand went briefly to the blue whistle hanging from a cord around his neck. One edge of it was chipped. The first runs began. Donald MacLean's dog performed neatly enough to disappoint the spectators, who preferred either brilliance or disaster. Then Fergus gave a short demonstration with his own dog, Moss. He lifted the blue whistle to his mouth. The sound came out wrong at first. A faint split note, thin and cracked, before settling into a sharp command. Moss flinched before moving, then swept across the field beautifully, turning the sheep with such precision that several handlers folded their arms in self-defence. "That's a dog," murmured an old crofter near Hamish. "Aye," said another. "Or a soldier." Hamish watched Moss return to Fergus's heel. The dog had obeyed perfectly. That was what troubled him. Annalise stood beside Hamish and wrote one line in her notebook. "You heard it?" she asked. "The cracked note?" And saw the dog move before the command settled. "Aye, most people call that trust," she said. "I try to notice what the dog calls it." The next handler was Jamie Sutherland, 22, thin, proud, and trying too hard not to look nervous. His mother, Myri, stood near the rope line with an unopened flask clutched in both hands. Jamie's dog, Glen, was young and keen, watching the sheep with bright hunger. For a moment the run went well. Glen cast wide, gathered the sheep, and brought them cleanly toward the first gate. Then, from somewhere near the handler's tent, came another faint split note. Glen checked. Jamie blew his own whistle, urgent now, but the dog hesitated and bolted toward the wrong gate. The sheep scattered. A silence fell over the field, the cruel sort that arrives when everyone has seen and nobody knows where to look. Annalise raised her hand. Disqualified. Jamie stared at her, his face white, then red. "He was put off," he said. Your dog reacted to another tone. Fergus gave a soft laugh from near the tent. "The wind plays tricks here. The burn throws sound strangely." "Does it?" said Annalise. Jamie heard only the pity under the words around him. "She doesna know Highland dogs," he snapped. "Coming here with a notebook, judging men she's never seen work." "Jamie," said his mother, but shame had him now. "You can write what you like," he said to Annalise. "You don't know us." "I know a frightened dog when I see one," she replied. That was the wrong truth in the wrong place. Jamie's mouth twisted. "You say that again!" And what?" barked Blair, arriving late and pleased to find trouble already prepared. "You'll threaten a judge in front of police?" Jamie froze. Hamish stepped between him and the field. "That's enough," he said. Blair glared. "I'll decide what's enough." "No," said Hamish mildly. "You'll make it worse. That's no the same thing." People suddenly became interested in tea, boots, and the weather. Jamie clipped Glen's lead with shaking fingers and walked off toward the lane. His mother followed a moment later, keeping her back straight. The trial continued because village life often does, but Hamish kept looking at Fergus Beaton's chipped blue whistle and at Moss standing too still by his master's leg. By noon, everyone in Lochdubh would be talking about Jamie Sutherland's temper. Hamish was already thinking about the sound that had made a sheepdog turn. Chapter 2. A dog that wouldn't turn. By lunchtime, Jamie Sutherland's disgrace had travelled faster than any dog on the field. At Mrs. Patel's tea table, it had already grown extra legs. "He threatened her," said Jessie Curry, clutching her paper cup with both hands. "He nearly threatened her," said Nessie. "That is only the polite Highland version." Hamish, passing with an empty crate, paused. Jamie lost his temper. "That's all." "That is what men call it before furniture is broken," said Jessie. "No furniture was involved," said Hamish. "Only sheep," said Nessie, as if this made matters worse. Across the field, Jamie's mother, Myri, stood near the stone dyke, pretending not to hear anyone. Her flask remained unopened. She held it tight, not for warmth, but for something to do with her hands. The trial continued with forced cheer. Donald MacLean's old dog took sheep through the gate, slowly but correctly, which disappointed those who had hoped for more drama. A woman from Kinlochbervie made a tidy run, and was praised generously because she was not local enough to offend anyone. Fergus Beaton moved among the handlers with his calm smile, offering quiet advice that sounded helpful until one noticed how small it made the listener feel. Annalise Kerr watched everything. She did not write often, and that was what unsettled people. A judge who scribbled constantly could be dismissed as fussy. Annalise wrote only when something mattered. Hamish drifted near the score table. "You marked Jamie's run," he said. "I marked what happened during it." "The dog turned at the wrong sound?" "Yes." "Could have been the wind." "So Mr. Beaton said." She looked toward Fergus, who was speaking to two younger handlers. His blue whistle hung against his jacket, the chipped edge catching pale light whenever he moved. "He said it fast," Hamish observed. "Too fast," said Annalise. That was all. But it was enough. Blair appeared with a bridie in one hand and irritation in the other. He had been trying to light a cigarette in the wind and failing, which had not improved his opinion of Lochdubh. "You two still making a mystery out of a bad run?" he demanded. A dog reacted to another whistle, said Annalise. Blair snorted. Dogs react to anything. Sheep, weather, fools. Lugs, who had been sitting near Hamish's boot, looked up at Blair with mild interest. And some react to policemen, said Hamish. Blair glared at the dog. That animal should be kept away from the field. He agrees about you. Mrs. Patel arrived with fresh tea before Blair could reply. Inspector, more tea? No. She poured it anyway. You look like a man who needs help from outside himself. A few shoulders turned away, shaking. Blair drank the tea because it was there, and because refusing it would have looked like defeat. The next run began. A red dog called Roy moved slowly but intelligently, guiding the sheep as if he had known them all his life and disapproved of their decisions. The crowd softened. Even Annalise gave the smallest nod. Good old dog, said Hamish. A trusted one, said Annalise. Fergus, standing close enough to hear, smiled. Trust is a fine word, but a working dog must obey. A working dog must understand, Annalise replied. Same thing, if trained properly. Not always. The words were quiet, but several handlers heard them. A chill of discomfort spread through the tent side of the field. Men who liked Fergus looked annoyed. Men who disliked him looked pleased, but tried to hide it. Fergus's thumb rubbed the cord of his whistle. Hamish noticed. Annalise noticed Hamish noticing. Morag Coyle, the trial secretary, came up with her clipboard flapping in the wind. Miss Kerr, we'll need your provisional scores before the prize runs tomorrow. I'll give them after I've checked some details. What details? Run order. Handler positions. Sales certificates for dogs entered as trained by Mr. Beaton. Morag's mouth opened, then shut. That's not usual. No, said Annalise. Folk will not like it. I did not expect they would. Fergus was still smiling, but the warmth had thinned. My records are tidy, he said. You're welcome to inspect them. Good, said Annalise. This evening, then. The silence after that was small but sharp. Mrs. Patel, who had missed nothing, began wrapping 2 bridies in paper. For Jamie? Hamish asked. For his mother, she said. Hungry shame becomes cruel. Hamish took the packet up to the dyke. Myrie Sutherland looked at it as if charity had teeth. Mrs. Patel overcooked, he said. Myrie accepted the lie with tired gratitude. Jamie is not bad, she said. I know. He's proud. That is not the same as wicked. No. Her eyes moved to Fergus. Some men can make pride look like skill. Some can make kindness feel like a debt. Hamish followed her gaze. Fergus was laughing now, one hand resting briefly on his dog's head. Moss did not lean into the touch. He merely endured it, waiting. Below them, Glenn limped as Jamie led him past the far side of the field toward the lane. It was slight, easy to miss. Jamie saw Hamish looking and turned away quickly. Stone in the pad, Myrie said. He'll be fine. But her voice was too quick. The afternoon wore on. The burn ran louder under the bank. The wind shook the tent ropes. Cups blew from tables. Children were warned away from dogs, sheep, mud, the burn, and finally each other. Then Annalise stopped one handler for striking the ground too near his dog with a crook. I did not touch him, the man protested. I said you frightened him. It's a working dog. Then work him. Do not threaten him. The words travelled. So did the resentment. When the final run ended, people began folding chairs and gathering flasks while pretending the day had been friendly. Annalise closed her notebook and looked toward the kennel track beyond the burn. Hamish came beside her. You're going to Fergus Beaton's place. I am. He'll be less welcoming away from witnesses. He invited me to inspect his records. That's not the same as wanting you there. She looked at him, and this time there was a real flicker of amusement. Are you offering protection, Constable? Mostly company. Protection sounds too official. Then come as company. Behind them, Fergus lifted his blue whistle and let it fall back against his chest. The chipped edge clicked softly against a button. Hamish heard it. So did Annalise. Neither of them turned around. Chapter 3. The Kennel Visit. Fergus Beaton's croft stood above the lower field, where the road narrowed and the wind seemed to arrive with more opinion. By the time Hamish and Annalise reached it, dusk had begun to gather in the hollows. Rain ticked softly on the tin roof of the kennel block. Beyond the yard, the trial field was only a darker green shape below them, with the burn showing now and then like dull pewter. Fergus was waiting at the gate. "Miss Kerr," he said warmly. "Constable, I didn't realise you were coming as a pair." "Company," said Hamish. "Ah. Lochdubh hospitality has become official." Annalise did not smile. "You said I could inspect your records." "So I did." He led them across the yard. 6 kennels stood in a neat row, cleaner than many kitchens Hamish had seen. The dogs barked once as they approached, then quieted almost together. Too quickly, Hamish thought. A good kennel had noise in it. Complaint, curiosity, boredom, the small, rough music of animals with opinions. Fergus's dogs watched from behind wire fronts with bright, fixed attention. "They're well settled," Fergus said. "They're very still," Annalise replied. "Discipline, perhaps." Inside the tack room, everything hung in its place. Leads, crooks, towels, tins of feed, brushes, stacked folders. Fergus unlocked a metal cabinet and drew out a file. "Sale certificates," he said. "Pedigree papers. Training notes. I've nothing to hide." Hamish wandered, hands in pockets, as if admiring the order. On a shelf sat several whistles. Black, silver, green, and 2 blue plastic ones without cords. Fergus's own chipped blue whistle still hung around his neck. Annalise opened the file. For several minutes the only sounds were rain, paper, and a dog shifting once in the kennel outside. "This dog," Annalise said at last. "Moss." "Aye. Sold to you as a pup from Glenmara stock?" "That's right." "And this one?" "Bracken. Sold last year to Mr. Henry Flett near Dingwall. Also Glenmara stock?" "A different line." "They have nearly identical markings." Fergus gave a soft laugh. "Border collies are not exactly peacocks, Miss Kerr." "No? But ear tattoos are less poetic." Hamish saw Fergus's smile pause. Annalise turned another page. "I'll need copies of these." "I can send them." "I would prefer to take photographs now." "That feels a little mistrustful." "It is not a feeling. It is procedure." Fergus closed the folder gently with one hand. "You come to our glen, watch one bad run, and now you're looking for villains. I received complaints before I came here." The warmth left his face in a controlled way, as if a lamp had been turned down. "From buyers who couldn't handle good dogs," he said. "That is all. People want a finished animal, then spoil it with softness. Softness does not ruin a good dog." "No? You'd be surprised what kindness excuses." Outside, one of the dogs whimpered. Fergus's head turned sharply. Not much, but enough. The sound stopped. Hamish looked toward the kennel door. On the stone wall beyond it, Sonsie had appeared without announcement. The wild cat sat in the rain as if weather were a servant's problem, staring into the kennel yard. One dog inside gave a low, uncertain sound. Fergus noticed the cat and frowned. "That beast should not be here." "Sonsie rarely asks permission," said Hamish. "She unsettles the dogs." "Does she?" Annalise had moved to the doorway. She watched the nearest collie, a small black and white bitch with a torn ear. The dog did not look at Sonsie. She looked at Fergus. "May I see that one's papers?" Annalise asked. "Jess?" "She's not entered tomorrow. Her papers." Fergus hesitated, then opened another drawer. "You'll find this very dull." "I often do." Hamish nearly smiled. The new folder was thinner. Annalise read it under the hanging bulb. Rain shivered down the small window. "This bitch and Bracken have the same dam listed," she said. "Aye, but different breeders." "An error." "And different birth months." "Another error." "That is a busy kind of mistake." Fergus stepped closer. "You are making a great deal out of paper." Paper is what people use when they want lies to last longer than speech. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Fergus laughed, but there was no amusement in it. "You've a sharp tongue for someone who claims to care about kindness." "I care about dogs. People can defend themselves," Hamish said mildly. "Not always wisely." Fergus turned on him. "And what do you think you found, Macbeth?" "I'm still looking. That'll be a comfort to criminals everywhere." Annalise placed the folder on the table. "I will not announce final prizes tomorrow until I have compared these records with tattoo registrations. If there is nothing wrong, you have nothing to fear." It was the sort of sentence meant to reassure innocent people and irritate guilty ones. Fergus did not look reassured. "You'll damage my name with suspicion alone," he said. "Then help me remove it." His hand closed around the blue whistle cord. The chipped edge pressed into his palm. Hamish saw the pressure whiten his knuckles. A dog barked sharply outside. Sonsie had vanished from the wall. The yard seemed larger without her. Fergus released the whistle and smiled again. "You must both be cold," he said. "I'll make tea." "No need," said Annalise. "We're done for tonight." "We?" Fergus asked, looking at Hamish. "Company," said Hamish again. They walked back down the track under a fine, persistent rain. Behind them, the kennels remained quiet. Too quiet. When they reached the bend above the burn crossing, Annalise stopped and looked back at the croft. "He is lying," she said. "Ah, yeah. Ah, yeah. You say that calmly. Folk lie every day. It's the size of the lie that takes measuring." She tucked the notebook inside her jacket. "Tomorrow I'll ask Morag for the full run order cards, and I'll need Fergus's sale records checked against ear tattoos. You'll make enemies before breakfast." "I believe I already have." Below them, the burn ran brown and fast beside the lower field. The crossing gate tapped lightly in the wind. Hamish listened. No whistles now. Only rain, water, and the faint barking of dogs behind a closed door. But he could still hear that cracked blue note in his mind, splitting before it became a command. Chapter 4. The Burn Crossing. Morning came grey, wet, and reluctant. The lower field looked smaller under mist. The hills were hidden. The burn ran swollen and brown beyond the pens, carrying bits of heather, grass, and yesterday's rain down toward the loch. A few handlers had already arrived, boots dark with mud, voices low. Nobody admitted to being early. They said they had come to check the ground. Hamish arrived with lugs at his heel and a piece of toast in his hand. He had slept badly. The cracked whistle note had followed him into sleep and woken him twice, though the second time it had only been lugs dreaming and making small puffing noises by the stove. Mrs. Patel was setting out cups under a tarpaulin. "You look as if breakfast lost," she said. "It fought bravely." "Tear?" "Ah, yeah." Before she could pour it, a shout came from the direction of the burn. Not a trial shout, not a handler's call. This was raw, human, and frightened. Hamish was already moving. Morag Coyle stood near the crossing gate, one hand to her mouth, her clipboard dropped in the mud. Beyond her, beside the narrow path where handlers brought dogs from the kennel track to the field, Annalise Kerr lay still in the wet grass. There was no drama in it. That made it worse. Her notebook was gone. Her waxed jacket was dark with rain. One arm lay awkwardly near the broken chain of the little gate. The burn hurried past only a few feet away, loud and indifferent. Hamish stopped the others with one raised hand. "Stay back." Morag began to tremble. "I only came to check the gate. I thought she'd slipped. I thought—" "Go to Mrs. Patel," said Hamish gently. "Tell her to keep folk away. I touched nothing." "I know." She went, stiff-legged, as if afraid the ground itself might accuse her. Hamish crouched near Annalise, but did not disturb her more than he had to. The grass was flattened between the gate and the bank. Mud had been churned by more than one set of boots. A length of chain hung broken from the post. Near it, caught against a wet stone, was a tiny blue shaving of plastic. Hamish looked at it for a long moment. Then he looked at Annalise's coat. There, Across the lower front was a muddy paw print. Not a smear from falling, a clear print, pressed down as if a dog had stood beside her or over her after she went down. Behind him, Lugs gave a low, uneasy sound. "Stay," Hamish murmured. Lugs stayed. For once, he looked willing to obey. Within 15 minutes, the field had filled with silence. People gathered at the rope line, no longer pretending anything. The sheep shifted in the pens. Dogs sensed human fear and became restless, pulling at leads, whining, looking for instructions that did not come. Blair arrived in a car that skidded at the gate and stopped badly. "What's this now?" he barked, climbing out. "Macbeth, why is nobody controlling this circus?" "It is being controlled," said Hamish. "By who? The dog?" Blair pushed toward the crossing. Hamish stepped into his path. "Mind the ground. I know how to walk." "That'll be new." Blair glared, but he slowed. When he saw Annalise, his face changed, not with tenderness, but with professional excitement poorly disguised as irritation. "Slipped," he said at once. "Fool woman out here in the wet." "She didna simply slip." Blair turned. "And you know that because?" "The chain is broken. There are boot marks coming from the kennel track, and there's a dog print on her coat. Dog trial, Macbeth. Dogs everywhere. Aye. But not all dogs stand on a dead woman." The word moved through those close enough to hear it. Dead. Until then, people had known and not known. Blair looked toward the crowd. His eyes found Jamie Sutherland near the back, pale and rigid, Glenn on a lead beside him. The dog held one forepaw slightly off the ground. "There's our man," Blair said. "No. He threatened her yesterday in front of witnesses. He was at home." "According to who?" "His mother? And his dog is lame. A lame dog doesna clear a man." "No," said Hamish. "But it tells you to look before roaring." Blair jabbed a finger toward Jamie. "Bring him here." Jamie heard his name and stiffened. Myrie gripped his sleeve. The villagers shifted, parting without meaning to, making a path of accusation. Hamish felt anger then, quiet and sharp. "You'll not parade him over this ground," he said. Blair swung round. "Are you giving orders?" "I'm preventing you trampling evidence." "That's my investigation. It's a death scene." For a moment, Blair looked as if he might shove past him. Then a uniformed constable from Strathbane arrived with tape, and Blair chose command over dignity. "Get this area sealed," he snapped. "And keep that Sutherland lad where I can see him." Hamish walked back toward the rope line before Jamie could be dragged into Blair's theatre. Jamie's face was ashen. "I didna do anything." "I'm no asking yet. I said things. I was angry. But I never came here," Myrie said. "He was in the shed with Glenn after dark. The dog cut his pad on slate. I bandaged it myself." Hamish looked down. Glenn's bandage was clean, tied clumsily but firmly. The paw he held up was dry despite the wet field. "When did you last see Annalise?" Hamish asked. Jamie swallowed. "Yesterday, after she shamed me." "She shamed you?" She said Glenn was frightened. "In front of everyone." "And was he?" Jamie looked away. That answer mattered more than a denial. Near the pens, Fergus Beaton stood among the handlers, moss close to his leg. He looked grave, composed, and sad in a way that would photograph well. When he saw Hamish watching, he removed his cap. "A terrible thing," Fergus said. "Aye. She should not have come down here alone in the mist." "Did she?" Fergus blinked. "What? Come alone?" "I assumed. Assumptions are handy. They save time." Fergus's gaze flicked past him to the crossing. Hamish noticed that Moss did not look at the body. The dog looked at Fergus's hand. Morag returned, wrapped in Mrs. Patel's shawl, though she insisted she did not need it. "Her notebook," she said suddenly. Hamish turned. "What about it?" "She had it yesterday. Always under her arm. It's not there." Blair, overhearing, shouted, "Search the field!" People began looking at once, far too eagerly. A search gave everyone permission to be useful and curious at the same time. Hamish stayed where he was. The notebook had not been dropped, he thought. Annalise Kerr had written down things someone feared, and now the book was gone, a chain was broken, a blue shaving lay by the gate, and a dog had left one muddy print where no dog had any reason to be. The burn went on talking over stones. From somewhere behind the handler tent, a whistle blew by accident or design. One dog lifted its head sharply. Moss did not move. He was waiting, Hamish thought, for the wrong kind of permission. Chapter 5. Bad bacon, good broth. Blair's idea of investigation was to choose the most embarrassed person and stand very close to him. By late morning, Jamie Sutherland had been taken to the temporary police room in the back of the village hall, which was normally used for storing hymn books, raffle prizes, and one broken music stand nobody admitted owning. Blair sat across from him with a notebook open and a face full of certainty. "You threatened her," he said. Jamie stared at the table. "I was angry. You say that again, and I didna finish. Because I interrupted you, because I had nothing to finish with." Blair leaned back as if this were an insult to procedure. "Convenient." Hamish stood by the door, saying little. Jamie looked exhausted rather than cunning. His hands were muddy, but so were everyone's hands within half a mile of the trial field. His boots had old yard mud on them, not the slick brown muck from the burn crossing. More importantly, his anger had the open heat of humiliation, not the cold tidiness of someone who had removed a notebook. Myrie waited outside, refusing to sit. Mrs. Patel had brought her tea. The cup remained untouched. After 20 minutes, Blair grew bored with contradiction. "We'll get the truth out of him in Strathbane," he said. "You've not enough to take him. I've motive. You've public shame. That's no the same thing. I've threat. You've half a sentence. And opportunity." Hamish shook his head. "Not yet." Blair's eyes narrowed. "You always were fond of waifs and strays, Macbeth." "Aye. They're usually better company than men with rank." That earned him a glare, but also a pause. Blair enjoyed bullying. He disliked being made to look foolish while doing it. By noon they drove to Strathbane to file reports and meet the medical examiner. Blair insisted on stopping at the police canteen, where the bacon had curled at the edges like old paper and the tea tasted faintly of the Ern's previous disappointments. Hamish pushed his plate away after 2 bites. "Too fine for you?" Blair asked. "No. Too dead. You're soft. I'm alive. That may be the difference." The medical examiner, a dry woman with silver spectacles, gave them little comfort. Annalise had suffered a fatal blow near the burn crossing. A fall could account for some injuries, but not all. There were signs of a struggle. Bruising on one wrist, mud pressed into one side of her coat, and traces of blue plastic caught near the broken gate chain. Blair brightened at the word struggle. "There you are." Jamie grabs her. She falls. "Finished. Then removes a notebook?" Hamish asked. Panic. "And brings a dog?" Blair stabbed at the bacon. "There were dogs everywhere." "Not in Strathbane canteen," said Hamish. "Though it would improve the conversation." Blair ignored him. The notebook had been found later by a constable under the edge of the handler's tent, soaked, but not ruined. Someone had thrown it badly, or hidden it in haste. Hamish took it back to Lochdubh wrapped in a plastic evidence bag and read it in Mrs. Patel's kitchen, while rain tapped steadily against the window. Mrs. Patel set broth before him without asking. "Eat that before you become official," she said. The broth was hot, thick with barley and carrots, and tasted of patience. Hamish felt his temper settle. The notebook was written in Annalise's neat, severe hand. Most entries were ordinary. Dog names, handler habits, welfare concerns, comments on overuse of the crook, tightening leads, dogs responding before commands. Jamie's page was clear. Glenn reacted to external split note. Handler angry, not calculating. Dog stress visible. Check other whistle sources. Hamish turned the page. Half of the next sheet had been torn away. Only the top line remained. F.B. Sale. Certificates compare ear tattoo records. The rest was gone. Mrs. Patel, drying cups at the sink, said, "F.B. is Fergus Beaton." "It is." She meant to say something about him. "Aye." She said enough to worry him. Hamish looked at the torn edge. It was not ragged from rain. Someone had gripped and pulled in a hurry. She said enough to make someone want the page. Mrs. Patel placed a cup beside him. "Fergus has trained half the Glen's dogs." "And corrected half the Glen's men?" "That too." Her mouth tightened. "Some people like being corrected by a successful man. They call it learning. Others remember how it felt." Hamish thought of Myrie's words. "Kindness made into debt." "Who complained about him?" he asked. "Not openly." "That is not an answer. It is the only kind Lochdubh offers when fear is expensive." She sat down opposite him. "There was Henry Flett near Dingwall. Bought a dog from Fergus last winter. Beautiful animal. Would not settle. Snapped at his wife when she lifted a broom. Fergus said Henry had spoiled it. Did Henry complain? After paying that much? Men do not like admitting they bought trouble with both eyes open." Hamish copied the name. "And Jamie?" "Jamie could never afford Fergus. That makes him safer to blame. Poor anger looks uglier than rich control." Outside, a vehicle splashed through the puddles. Blair's voice followed it almost at once, loud in the lane. "Macbeth." Mrs. Patel closed her eyes briefly. "Soup cannot fix everything." Blair entered without knocking, and brought wet air with him. "I've got 3 witnesses saying Jamie left the field before dark and was not seen again till morning. He went home." "So," his mother says. And Glen cut his pad. "Convenient again?" Hamish stood. "Let's look at the dog." Jamie's shed was behind the Sutherland croft, patched with corrugated tin and smelling of straw, damp wool and liniment. Jamie did not want to let them in, which Blair took as guilt and Hamish took as shame. Glen lay under a bench, his bandaged forepaw stretched carefully in front of him. "When was he hurt?" Hamish asked. "Yesterday, after the run," Jamie muttered. "He caught slate by the back wall. I cleaned it." Myrie produced the cloths without being asked. Dried blood marked 1. The bandage was clumsy, but old enough to satisfy Hamish. Glen had not been racing through mud at dawn. Hamish crouched and held out his hand. The dog sniffed him, then glanced toward Jamie before coming forward. Blair lifted his arm to scratch his nose. Glen flinched hard and slid back under the bench. The shed went quiet. Jamie's face burned. "He's nervy since yesterday." "Since Fergus worked with him?" Hamish asked softly. Jamie looked away. Myrie answered. "Fergus gave him a lesson 2 weeks ago. Said Jamie was too soft." Blair scoffed. "Now the dog's a witness?" "Better than some," said Hamish. On the way back down the lane, rain easing at last, Blair said, "You're building castles out of paw prints and hurt feelings." "No," said Hamish. "I'm looking at what fits." "And what fits?" "A missing page about Fergus. A blue plastic shaving by the broken chain. A dog print on Annalise's coat, and Jamie's dog unable to leave it." Blair lit his cigarette at last, and looked disappointed when the wind immediately killed it. At the lower field, Fergus Beaton stood near the handler's tent, speaking gently to a group of men who listened as if gentleness itself were proof of innocence. His blue whistle was gone from around his neck, Hamish noticed, and when Fergus saw him notice, his hand rose once to the empty place at his collar, then dropped. Chapter 6. Hamish makes it worse. By early afternoon, the sheepdog trial had become the kind of event people attended in order to say they wished they had stayed away. The lower field was open again, but not cheerful. The prize runs had been postponed until the next morning, though everyone remained near the tents as if leaving would mean missing the first proper shape of the scandal. Dogs lay under benches or strained at leads. Sheep stood in the pens, chewing with the calm superiority of creatures who had never cared for human reputation. Jamie Sutherland came down from his croft just after 2, against his mother's wishes and Hamish's advice. He had left Glen at home. That was sensible. It also made him look guilty. The moment he stepped through the gate, the field changed. Conversations lowered, heads turned, then turned away. Sympathy moved around him with the delicate cruelty of a draught under a door. Mrs. Patel saw it and went to pour tea. The Curry sisters saw it and sat straighter. Blair saw it and smiled. "There he is," Blair said. "Couldn't keep away from the scene." Hamish said quietly, "Many innocent folk return to places where they have been shamed. That from your advanced policing course? Common life?" Jamie stopped near the rope line. Myrie stood behind him, her face set hard enough to hold back tears. Hamish crossed to them before Blair could. "You should go home," he said. Jamie's chin lifted. "So folk can say I ran? They'll say what suits them anyway. I didna kill her. I know that more today than I did yesterday. But Blair wants you angry, and you're helpful enough to oblige him." Jamie's face twitched. He looked young then, not dangerous. Young and tired and cornered. "So I just hide? For today." Myrie touched his sleeve. "Listen to him." Jamie looked across the field. Fergus Beaton was standing by the handler's tent, bare-necked now without the blue whistle. He spoke softly to Alastair MacRae, who listened with folded arms and a face like a shut gate. Jamie saw the missing whistle too. His eyes narrowed. "He took that off quick enough." Hamish's interest sharpened. "You noticed?" "I heard it yesterday. That cracked note. Glenn heard it too. Why did you not say?" Jamie gave a bitter little laugh. "After I shouted at her, who'd believe me? That is exactly why you should go home." Jamie looked as if he might argue, but then Blair shouted from behind them, "Sutherland!" Avord, the field heard it. Of course it heard it. Blair had pitched his voice for the whole glen. Jamie flushed. Hamish stepped back toward Blair. "Not here. I'll speak to a suspect where I please. You'll speak to him at the station if you've cause. Otherwise you'll stop putting him on show." Blair's eyes gleamed. "Still protecting him?" "I'm protecting the investigation from your appetite." A few people nearby became suddenly devoted to their boots. Blair lowered his voice. "Careful, Macbeth." Hamish smiled mildly. "I am. That's what annoys you." It was enough to hold Blair for the moment, but not enough to save Jamie from the field. By the time Hamish turned back, Jamie had walked away through the gate, his mother following. To the village, it looked like flight. Nessie Curry leaned toward Jessie. "He's leaving." "He was told to leave," said Jessie. "That sounds worse." "It always does." Mrs. Patel, passing with a tray, said, "Sometimes the kindest advice looks like guilt from a distance." The sisters absorbed this, then immediately began offering it to others as if they had thought of it. Hamish seichert. "That went well," said Mrs. Patel. "You're enjoying yourself." "No. I am noticing that men who try to prevent gossip often water it." Near the lunch tent, Morag Coyle was pinning revised notices to a board. "Prize runs tomorrow, weather and police permitting." Someone had crossed out police and written Blair underneath. Morag stared at it, then left it there. Hamish joined her. "Who had the run order cards yesterday?" he asked. "Me." Fergus helped call handlers. Alastair checked the sheep numbers. Annalise asked to see the cards after Jamie's run. "Did she keep them?" "No." She copied something into a notebook. "Could someone change the order?" Morag frowned. "Why would they?" "That's not an answer." She looked toward the tent. "Fergus had the board for a while. Said he was tidying confusion." "Was there confusion?" "There is always confusion. He likes it better when it belongs to other people." Before Hamish could ask more, an elderly woman named Catriona Gillies came close, then stopped, clutching a string shopping bag to her chest. "You heard something yesterday," Hamish said gently. Her eyes widened. "Who told you?" "No one." "You look like a person trying not to know something." "I don't want to be in this." "You are already in it if you heard it." Catriona looked past him toward Jamie's retreating figure. It was near dawn. "I was bringing eggs down for Mrs. Patel before the field filled. I heard a whistle by the burn, a cracked one, then a dog's feet on the boards." "The crossing boards?" She nodded. "Did you see anyone?" "Mist was thick. A man's shape, maybe. Or a post." "I'm not swearing to shadows." "Why did you not speak?" Her mouth tightened. because once Jamie shouted, everyone knew what the story was. And I've no wish to be the old fool who muddles it. You're not muddling it. Tell that to Blair. Hamish could not promise that. At the tent entrance, Fergus was watching them. When Hamish met his eye, Fergus smiled sadly, as if pitying the whole troubled village. Catriona saw him and stepped away. There, she whispered. That is why. Fergus? He trained my brother's dog. When it failed, folk said my brother had ruined a fine animal. He never held his head up after. Fergus never raised his voice once. That made it worse. She left before Hamish could answer. The wind lifted the notice on the board and slapped it back against the wood. Hamish looked around the field. Jamie gone. Mary wounded by pity. Blair pleased with a public suspect. Fergus calm among men who still wanted him to be respectable. Hamish had meant to protect the lad, and had instead made the shape of guilt clearer to every watching eye. Mrs. Patel came beside him with a cup of tea. You cannot stop people seeing badly, she said. No, but you can make them look twice. Hamish took the cup. Across the field, Fergus raised his hand to his collar again, found no whistle there, and let the hand fall. Hamish watched him. Some absences were louder than sound. Chapter 7. The Wrong Whistle. Jamie Sutherland's shed sat behind the croft like an apology made of tin and old timber. Rain had stopped, but everything still dripped. Water fell from the roof in slow, patient beads. A broken rake leaned by the door. Inside, there was the smell of straw, damp wool, liniment, and young pride shut in too long. Jamie stood with his back to the workbench, arms folded. I've told you already, he said. Aye, said Hamish. Now tell me when Blair isna making a performance of listening. Jamie looked toward the door, where Mary hovered. Hamish turned gently. Mrs. Sutherland, would you make tea? She knew dismissal when it was kindly wrapped, but she also knew Jamie would speak better without his mother's fear watching every word. She nodded and went toward the house. Glenn lay under the bench, his bandaged forepaw stretched carefully in front of him. He watched Hamish with soft, worried eyes. Hamish crouched but did not reach for him. How's the pad? Clean cut, said Jamie. Slate by the back wall. Before dawn yesterday? After the trial. Before supper. You can prove that? Jamie's mouth hardened. I didna know I'd need a lawyer for a dog's foot. No. Folk rarely prepare for the worst thing they'll be asked. That took some of the anger out of him. Hamish looked around the shed. A black horn whistle hung from a nail near Jamie's jacket. He lifted it carefully. This yours? Aye. Only one? Jamie gave him a tired look. I'm poor, not mysterious. Hamish tried it softly. Barely more than breath. The note was low, clean, and plain. No crack in it, he said. No, but yesterday, after your run, you said Glenn was put off. He was. By Fergus? Jamie did not answer. Hamish waited. Outside, a hen complained somewhere in the yard, as if life had personally disappointed it. At last, Jamie said, Fergus worked Glenn 2 weeks ago. Your mother told me. I never asked her to. Mothers have a habit of saving sons who would rather drown respectably. Jamie looked away, but a corner of his mouth moved despite himself. You said Glenn had promise, he said. Said I was wasting him. Too much talk, too much softness, not enough command. And then he took him for 10 minutes. Not even that. I couldn't see all of it from the gate. He used that blue whistle. Glenn came back different. How? Quicker. But not better. He'd move before I asked, then freeze when I corrected him. Like he was trying to guess the punishment before it arrived. Hamish said nothing. Jamie's voice roughened. I thought it was me. I thought I'd made a mess of him. Glenn gave a small sound under the bench. Jamie looked down, shame and affection crossing his face together. He's a good dog. Aye, said Hamish. That's plain enough. He stood and lifted his hand to settle his cap more firmly. Glenn shrank back under the bench, so fast his bandaged paw knocked the wood. Jamie flinched too, but in a different way, not from fear, from being seen. Hamish lowered his hand slowly. Fergus raised a crook over him. Jamie's jaw tightened. He never hit him. That's what folks say, isn't it? If there's no mark, there's no cruelty. Not folk worth hearing. For the first time, Jamie looked directly at him. The door opened, and Myrie came in with tea on a tray. She had added oatcakes, because distress in Lochdubh was rarely allowed to sit unfed. "I heard that," she said quietly, "and I'm glad someone said it." Jamie flushed. "Ma, I'll not be quiet about everything just because men think silence makes them taller." Hamish accepted a cup. "Did Fergus ever handle Glen after that?" "No," Jamie said. "I wouldn't have let him." "Did Annalise know?" "I told her after the run. Not properly. I was angry. I said Fergus's whistle had ruined him. Did she write it down?" Jamie thought. She looked at me as if she believed more than I'd said. That made me angrier. That often happens with the truth. Myrie sat on an upturned feed bucket. "Then she was killed, and now everyone thinks my boy did it because he shouted what half the field feared to say." Hamish took out his notebook. "Where were you before dawn?" "In here," said Jamie. "With Glen. He'd been licking the bandage. I slept on the sack there." "Anyone see you?" "My mother about 5. She brought hot water." Myrie nodded. "And the bandage was still clean before I took him out to pee. Dry, too. He'd not crossed that burn, or gone near mud." Hamish looked at Glen's paw. That much was true now, and had likely been true then. A dog could not leave a deep, wet paw print on Annalise's coat with a dry bandage and an injured pad. He set down the tea. "I want you to stay away from Fergus." Jamie's eyes flashed. "So he wins?" "No. So you don't hand Blair the story he wants. He already has it. Then don't make it neater." Jamie turned toward the small window. Through it, the lower field could be seen faintly, a dull green patch below the croft. "He'll get away with it. Men like Fergus do. They never shout. They just make you look foolish for bleeding." Hamish watched him. There it was. Not murder, not calculation, but the helpless rage of someone who had been made to doubt his own decency. "Did Fergus know Annalise planned to check tattoo records?" Hamish asked. "Aye. Everyone near the score table heard. And his whistle? What about it?" "It's missing." Jamie turned back. "I saw it after my run," he said. "Around his neck." "And after Annalise died?" "No." Myrie crossed herself without seeming to realize it. Hamish walked to the door. At the threshold, he stopped and looked once more at the black horn whistle on the nail. Wrong material. Wrong sound. Wrong man, perhaps, though the village liked its first answer. Outside, the clouds had lifted enough to show the hillside. A woman waited by the lane, pretending to examine a stone wall. It was Catriona Gillies. When Hamish approached, she said, "I'm no coming in. I didna ask. I remembered something." He waited. "The whistle near the burn," she said. "It was not just cracked. It had that little broken sound first, like 2 notes arguing. Then the proper call. The way Fergus's whistle sounds?" Her lips pressed together. "Aye. Will you tell Blair?" "I'd rather milk a wasp." "Then tell me again later where he can hear you by accident." That almost made her smile, as Hamish walked back down toward the field. Lugs emerged from the wet grass with a burr on one ear and an expression of injured importance. Hamish removed the burr carefully. "You and me both," he said. Below, Fergus Beaton stood among the handlers without his blue whistle, his hands empty and perfectly still. The wrong whistle had led everyone to Jamie. The right sound was beginning to lead Hamish elsewhere. Chapter 8. Sonsie and the Cord. That night, Hamish's cottage smelled of damp wool, peat smoke, and toast burned on one side. The fire had taken against him. It smoked whenever the wind leaned on the chimney, then settled innocently whenever he went to fix it. Lugs occupied the warmest patch of floor, with the calm certainty of an animal who believed comfort was a public service. Every so often he opened one eye at Hamish, as if to ask why murder investigations could not be conducted nearer the stove. Hamish sat at the table with Annalise Kerr's notebook open before him. The torn page troubled him more than the body at the burn, perhaps because paper was a quieter kind of violence. A person had reached for Annalise's words after she was dead or dying, not in grief, not in panic only. In fear of what she had seen, he copied the remaining line again. F.B. Sales certificates compare ear tattoo records. Then beneath it he wrote, blue plastic shaving at gate, whistle missing. Dog print on coat. Catriona heard split note at dawn. Jamie's whistle blackhorn. Glen lame. Dry bandage. Fergus's dogs too quick. Too still. It was not enough. It was beginning to become too much. Someone knocked. Hamish looked up. No one in Lochdubh knocked like that at night, unless they were either worried or pretending not to be. Mrs. Patel stood outside, with her hood up and a tin in her hands. I made too many oatcakes, she said. That has never happened in recorded history. Then record it. He let her in. Luggs lifted his head, identified the tin, and became suddenly civic-minded. Mrs. Patel set it on the table. Jamie's mother has had 3 visitors tonight. Accusers? Comforters. Worse. Aye. One brought soup and said nothing. One asked if Jamie had always been excitable. One said she believed in him but would not let her own dog near him for a while. Hamish closed his eyes briefly. Kindness with a hook in it, said Mrs. Patel. She took it badly? She took it silently. That is not the same thing. Hamish poured tea. Mrs. Patel did not sit at first. She looked at the notebook, the list, the muddy boots by the door. Fergus came to the shop, she said. When? Just before closing. Bought matches, soap, and 2 tins of dog food he does not usually buy. What kind? Cheap. Hamish looked at her. He feeds better than that, she said. He likes people knowing he feeds better than that. For his own dogs? He said for a stray. Fergus Beaton feeding a stray? That is what made me remember it. She sat then, folding her hands around the cup. Did he seem troubled? Hamish asked. He seemed careful. Troubled people forget small things. Careful people remember to smile. The wind pressed at the window. From outside came a faint scrape. Luggs rose, not fast, but with enough purpose to suggest the matter might involve food, intruders, or cats. The scrape came again, followed by a soft thump at the back door. Hamish took the lamp and opened it. Sonsie sat on the step in the rain. The wild cat looked wet, offended, and entirely responsible for his own legend. Something dark and stringy hung from his mouth. Oh, no, said Mrs. Patel behind Hamish. What has he murdered? Sonsie stepped inside without invitation, dropped the object on the flagstone, and shook one paw delicately. Luggs came forward, sniffed the thing, sneezed, and withdrew with a betrayed expression. Not food, then, Hamish crouched. It was a short length of blue cord, chewed and damp. Attached to one end, caught in a frayed knot, was a sliver of blue plastic. For a moment, the room seemed to narrow around it. Mrs. Patel said softly, The whistle cord? Ah, yeah. Hamish fetched tweezers and an envelope from the drawer where most men kept bills, and Hamish kept bits of string, receipts, and small, unpromising evidence. He lifted the cord carefully. The plastic was the same shade as the shaving found near the broken gate chain. The edge was rough, recently snapped. Where did you find it? Hamish asked the cat. Sonsie began washing his shoulder. He is unlikely to make a formal statement, said Mrs. Patel. He'll no enjoy Blair. Nobody does. Hamish looked at the blue cord again. Fergus's whistle had hung from blue cord. By the afternoon after Annalise's death, it had vanished from his neck. A fragment lay by the crossing. Now the cord had turned up at Hamish's door, delivered by the least cooperative witness in Sutherland. Could Sonsie have taken it from Fergus's yard? Mrs. Patel asked. Could have. He was there last night. Or from near the burn. Could have. That is not proof. No, but it tells me where to look harder. Sonsie, satisfied with his cleanliness, leapt onto the window-sill. Rain silvered his back. He stared out into the dark, as if the moor had sent him and now wanted him returned. Hamish placed the envelope beside the notebook. Mrs. Patel watched him. "You think Fergus used the whistle at the burn?" "I think Annalise was called there by someone she thought had business with her. I think a dog was present. I think a blue whistle broke or was damaged further at the gate. And I think Fergus took it off because even men who plan well can panic after. Then why not throw it in the burn? Maybe he did. Maybe the cord caught. Maybe the cat found what the water missed. Or maybe Fergus kept part of it until he thought better." Hamish rose and took his coat from the peg. Mrs. Patel stood too. "Now, before Blair makes an arrest out of embarrassment, you will go to Fergus?" "Not yet. First, I'll look at the crossing by lamplight, then the path to the kennels." Outside, the rain had thinned to a mist that moved sideways in the wind. Luggs came to the door, saw the weather, and decided moral support could be offered from indoors. "Traitor," said Hamish. Luggs wagged once without commitment. At the burn crossing, the night was full of water. Hamish kept the lamp low, following the path from the gate toward the kennel track. Rain had blurred much, but not everything. Near the stone where the chain had broken, reeds had been flattened on the kennel side, not the field side. Someone had stood there facing Annalise as she came through. A dog could have been beside him. A trained dog would stay where told. A frightened dog might step forward when a body fell. Hamish imagined the scene, without letting imagination outrun fact. Mist, a meeting before dawn. Annalise holding a notebook. A man speaking softly. The whistle in his hand or at his neck. A dog waiting for command. Then something went wrong. A struggle. A broken chain. A chipped whistle scraping stone. The blue cord in his pocket felt light as nothing, but it changed the weight of everything. When Hamish returned to the cottage, Sonsie was gone. Luggs had taken the opportunity to sleep with his chin on Hamish's discarded scarf. Mrs. Patel had left a note beside the stove. "Eat the oatcakes before solving anything else." Hamish ate one standing up. It tasted of butter, salt, and ordinary kindness. Then he wrote one final line beneath the others. The whistle was not lost after the murder. It was part of the murder. Chapter 9. The Dog That Came Too Fast. By morning, Lochdubh had decided to continue the sheepdog trial. It was not called continuing, of course. It was called letting the dogs have their day, not allowing tragedy to spoil proper work, and, by Mrs. Wellington, providing structure in a time of moral collapse. But everyone knew the truth. The village wanted to see what would happen next, and preferred to do so while holding a paper cup of tea. Before the prize runs began, Fergus Beaton gave a private demonstration to a buyer from Ullapool. Hamish watched from the gap beside the stock pens, where he could see without being invited. The buyer was a square man in a new waxed jacket, the sort of jacket that had not yet learned weather. Fergus stood with Moss at his heel, bare-necked still, no blue whistle visible. "You'll see he barely needs telling," Fergus said. "A proper dog," reads the handler. The buyer nodded, impressed before anything happened. Fergus put 2 fingers to his mouth and gave a sharp whistle. Not the blue whistle this time, but close enough in pattern. Moss moved instantly. Almost before the sound had finished, he swept out, low and fast, and checked the sheep cleanly at the far side. "Wonderful," said the buyer. "Aye," said Fergus. "He anticipates." Hamish stepped out from behind the pens. "That's one word for it." Fergus turned, smile ready. "Constable! Taking an interest in training now?" "I've always admired a dog that listens. And Moss does. He comes too fast." The buyer looked confused. Fergus did not. "A keen dog is no crime." "No, but a frightened one can look keen to a man wanting brilliance." The smile thinned. "You'll be repeating Miss Kerr's mistake next." She noticed before I did. Fergus's eyes moved once toward the burn crossing, then back. "A sad business. But I hope you're not letting grief turn into accusation." Hamish looked at Moss. The dog had completed the turn, and now lay flat in the wet grass, head low, eyes fixed on Fergus's hand. "May I see him work for another handler?" Hamish asked. The buyer gave a little laugh, thinking it a joke. Fergus did not laugh. "He is trained to me. That's handy. That is skill. Or dependence." For a moment, Moss lifted his head. Fergus's fingers twitched. The dog flattened again. The buyer coughed. "Perhaps I'll come back later." "Aye," said Hamish. "That may save you money." Fergus's face hardened after the man left. "You're damaging my business. Annalise Kerr was about to do that properly. I had no quarrel with her. You had paperwork with her." Fergus stepped closer. "Careful." Hamish's voice remained mild. "I usually am. It gives me more time to see what folk do when they think I'm not." Behind them, Alastair MacRae came along the fence with old Roy. He pretended to be adjusting a gate rope, but his ears had the alertness of a man listening with his whole face. Hamish said, "You bought a dog from Fergus once, Alastair?" "No," said Alastair. "I nearly did." Fergus turned. "And found you couldna afford him." "I found I didna care for a dog that ducked when you lifted a crook." The words landed heavily. Fergus gave him a cold look. "Roy ducks because he's ancient. Roy ducks for sheep," said Alastair. "Not men." Hamish let the silence work. Then he said, "Henry Flett, near Dingwall, bought Bracken from you." Fergus's jaw moved once. "Henry spoilt that dog." Henry's wife lifted a broom, and the dog hid under a table for an hour. "Gossip." "Patterns," said Hamish. "There's a difference." He walked past Fergus toward the tack box set inside the small field shelter. It was not locked. Perhaps Fergus thought a locked box would look guilty. Perhaps he trusted reputation more than padlocks. Inside were brushes, spare leads, ointment, old running cards, and a leather folder tucked beneath a folded feed sack. Fergus moved fast. "That is private." So was Annalise's notebook. Hamish opened the folder. Inside were copies of ear tattoo registrations, some neatly filed, some loose. 2 bore the same partial number under different dog names. Another registration listed a dam different from the one on Fergus's sale certificate. Alastair leaned over Hamish's shoulder and gave a low whistle. "Careful," said Hamish. "Whistles are becoming serious things." Fergus's voice was quiet now. "You do not understand this world. I understand men selling one thing and delivering another. You think papers make a dog? No. I think false papers make a fraud." Moss rose without command, then stopped himself. It was a tiny movement, but all 3 men saw it. Fergus did not look at the dog. "Put those back." "I will." "Into an evidence bag." The colour rose in Fergus's face. "You have no warrant." "No. But you invited half the glen to see what a good trainer keeps tidy. You'll find Blair more excited than lawful if I ask him." That, strangely, steadied Fergus. He knew Blair. Everyone did. "You're bluffing." "Aye," said Hamish. "But not only." From the lower field came the call for handlers to assemble. People began moving toward the rope line, drawn by scandal and sheep in equal measure. Hamish closed the folder. "You'll run Moss in the prize round?" he asked. "If the committee permits." "They will. They want the day to look normal." "And you?" "I want the day to show what normal has been hiding." Fergus smiled again, but this time it cost him effort. "You sound very grand for a village constable." Hamish looked at Moss, who waited with perfect stillness and no peace at all. "No," he said. "Just tired of watching folk mistake fear for good manners." As Hamish walked back toward the main field, Alastair fell into step beside him. "You'll need more than papers," Alastair said. "I know. You'll need the whistle." "I have part of it." Alastair stopped. "From where?" "Near enough to the burn to matter." The old crofter looked toward Fergus, then at the dogs waiting by the tent. "Then make him show himself," he said. Hamish watched the handlers gather, the villagers pretend not to crowd forward, and Blair arrive with the expression of a man who hoped to arrest somebody before tea. "Aye," said Hamish. That's the plan. On the far side of the field, Moss stood at Fergus Beaton's heel, beautiful, obedient, and afraid to be wrong. For the first time, Hamish felt the case beginning to turn. Chapter 10. The Prize Run. By the time the prize run was called, nobody in Lochdubh was pretending the trial was only about dogs. They stood along the rope line with cups cooling in their hands. The sheep waited in a tight knot near the far post. The burn ran brown and loud beyond the crossing, but the rain had stopped, and a thin, uncertain light lay over the field. Blair arrived beside Hamish, looking pleased with himself. "I've told Macnab to be ready," he said. "Sutherland bolts, we take him. He willna bolt." "You sound sure." "I told him not to." Blair snorted. "Oh, well, if Macbeth has advised him." Jamie stood with his mother near Mrs. Patel's table, pale but present. Glenn was not with him. That disappointed some people, who had hoped the dog might do something dramatic and make thinking unnecessary. Fergus Beaton came forward with Moss at his heel. He wore a clean jacket and no whistle around his neck. Morag Coyle cleared her throat. "Final demonstration before prizes. Mr. Beaton and Moss." A polite murmur moved through the field. Hamish stepped forward. "Before that, Fergus, I was wondering if you'd oblige us." Fergus smiled. "If it concerns the trial, it does. Folk have been saying Moss is the finest trained dog in the glen. It would be useful to show how he answers a whistle." "A dog answers his handler," Fergus said. "Usually." The word made the field sharpen. Hamish held up a small evidence envelope. Inside lay the chewed blue cord and a sliver of blue plastic. In another envelope was the shaving from the broken gate chain. Blair frowned. "What are you waving now?" "Bits of the wrong story." Hamish turned to the crowd. "Yesterday morning Annalise Kerr was found by the burn crossing. At first, folk wanted it to be an accident. Then they wanted it to be Jamie Sutherland, because Jamie had shouted at her, and shame makes a neat motive." Jamie looked down. Mary stood straighter. "But Jamie's dog was lame, with a dry bandage. His whistle is black horn and gives a clean note. The whistle heard near the burn at dawn was not clean. It had a split sound first." Catriona Gillies, standing near the back, whispered, "Aye," then looked annoyed with herself for speaking. Hamish continued, "That sound belongs to Fergus Beaton's blue whistle, the chipped one." Fergus's face remained calm. "My whistle was lost. Lost after Annalise died. It fell somewhere in the field. Part of it fell by the broken gate chain. Another part came back to my cottage on the cord." "Sonsie brought it," said Jessie Curry, unable to help herself. Nessie elbowed her. "Do not interrupt evidence." Blair rounded on Hamish. "You expect me to arrest a man because of a cat?" "No," said Hamish. "I expect you to listen, though I admit it is a novelty." A ripple went through the rope line and died quickly. Hamish nodded to Alastair MacRae, who stood behind a canvas screen near the handler tent. Alastair lifted a whistle to his mouth, not Fergus's broken one, but a new blue whistle cut by Hamish that morning to imitate the damaged split note. Fergus saw it and moved half a step. Moss moved with him. "Stay," Fergus said sharply. The dog dropped flat. Hamish said, "Now, Alasdair, blue." The first sound was wrong. A faint double note, cracked and thin. Then the clean call. Moss sprang before Fergus spoke. He ran hard toward the sheep, too hard, then checked himself midway and looked back, confused by the fact that the command had not come from the man he feared to disobey. The field went utterly quiet. "That proves nothing," Fergus said. "It proves Moss does not listen for you first," said Hamish. "He listens for that broken sound. He has been trained to move before a proper command, because delay costs him." "That is a filthy accusation." "Aye," said Hamish. And Annalise Kerr was about to write it formally. He took the leather folder from under his arm. "She found false sale certificates. Dogs sold under bloodlines that did not match tattoo records. Buyers blamed when animals failed to settle. Handlers shamed when dogs showed fear. Annalise wrote one line before the page was torn from her notebook. F.B. Sales certificates compare ear tattoo records. Fergus looked at the folder, then at the crowd. For the first time, his calm became work. Paper errors, he said. Nothing more. Then why tear out the page? I did not. Why remove your whistle? I told you. I lost it. At the burn crossing? Fergus said nothing. Hamish's voice stayed low. You asked Annalise to meet you before the field filled. You told her there was a problem with Jamie's dog, or with the run order, or with some record she should see privately. She came because she was doing her job. You had Moss with you. Perhaps to show her control. Perhaps because you rarely went anywhere without a dog proving who you were. Moss stood now between field and sheep, trembling. Fergus did not look at him. At the gate, Hamish went on, Annalise would not be softened. She had the certificates. She had the pattern. She had heard the split note. There was a struggle. The chain broke. Your whistle struck stone or chain and shed blue plastic. Annalise fell badly. Moss went to her, or stood over her, and left the paw print on her coat. Blair broke in. And the notebook? You'll like that part. It has procedure in it. The notebook was hidden under the handler's tent, not thrown far, hidden by someone who knew the tent, the score table, and the run order clutter. Someone trying to remove the one page that mattered. Fergus gave a short laugh. A lovely tale. No, said Hamish. A plain one. You let Jamie's public shame do the work for you. The village had already been handed its suspect. Mary's face tightened, but she did not speak. Hamish looked at Fergus. The proof is not one grand thing. It is the pattern. The split-note whistle. The blue fragments. The dog print. The missing page. The duplicate tattoo records. Moss answering the broken sound before he answers you. Fergus's mouth twisted. You know nothing about training. I know that obedience is not trust. The word sat in the field like a bell struck once. Fergus looked around then at the handlers, at the buyers, at the people who had admired him, because admiration was easier than doubt. His voice softened, turning, almost pleading. I made rough dogs useful. I gave men work they could not get elsewhere. I taught discipline. If a dog is to earn its keep, did Annalise earn what you gave her? Hamish asked. Fergus stopped. There was no confession in the theatrical sense. No collapse, no cry, no dramatic admission. Only the small failure of a man who had run out of acceptable explanations. Macnab moved in from the gate. Blair tried to step ahead of him. I'll take him, Blair said. You let Macnab do it properly, Hamish replied. Blair glowered, but the field was listening now, and even Blair knew when an audience had turned. Macnab placed a hand on Fergus's arm. Fergus Beaton, I need you to come with me. Moss whined. For the first time, Fergus looked down at the dog. Not with love, with irritation, as if the animal had betrayed him by revealing fear. That, more than the evidence, changed the village's face. Alastair MacRae walked across the grass and crouched a few feet from Moss. Easy, he said. No command, just easy. Moss did not move at first. Then, slowly, he lowered his head and crept toward the old man. No one applauded. It was not that kind of victory. Jamie Sutherland stood by the tea table with his hands clenched at his sides. Hamish went to him. You're clear, he said quietly. And I'll see Blair says it aloud. Jamie swallowed. Everyone heard him blame me. Aye. So everyone can hear him be wrong. Across the field, Blair pretended not to hear that. Mrs. Patel poured tea with unusual force. The sheep, released from their part in human disgrace, drifted toward the far grass. The prize run was over before it began. Chapter 11. A softer command. After Fergus Beaton was taken away, the lower field did not know what to do with itself. There were still sheep in the pens, dogs under benches, prizes unawarded, and tea enough for a congregation. But the usual little noises of a trial had gone thin. No one wanted to be the first to laugh. No one wanted to be seen leaving too quickly either. Morag Coyle stood by the score table, with her clipboard held to her chest. "Do we cancel?" she asked. Mrs. Wellington said, "Cancelling gives evil too much importance." Alastair McCrae, with Moss now sitting uncertainly near his old dog Roy, said, "Continuing as if nothing happened gives foolishness too much comfort." Mrs. Patel poured tea into 3 cups. "Then do neither," finished gently. That became the decision, mostly because nobody could improve on it. The prizes were read without speeches. The winning handler looked embarrassed to receive anything. The junior class was praised twice as warmly as usual. A small girl with a crooked ponytail won a ribbon for a dog that had chased sheep, mud, and its own idea of glory in equal measure. Everyone clapped too long, grateful for something innocent to applaud. Jamie Sutherland stood apart until Hamish went to him. "Come here," Hamish said. Jamie stiffened. "Why?" "Because Blair owes you noise." Blair, who had been attempting to look important near the gate, turned at the sound of his name. "What now?" "You accused Jamie in front of the field." "I followed evidence." "You followed volume." A few people coughed into cups. Hamish's voice remained mild, but it carried. Jamie Sutherland did not kill Annalise Kerr. His dog could not have left the paw print. His whistle did not make the sound heard by the burn. His anger was foolish, not murderous. Blair's face darkened. "Are you making a statement for me?" "I'm giving you a chance to repeat the correct one." There was a pause. Blair looked at the villagers. The villagers looked back with the terrible patience of people who intended to remember. Blair muttered, "The Sutherland lad is no longer a suspect." "Louder," said Mrs. Wellington. Blair glared at her. Mrs. Patel lifted the teapot. "Tea helps the throat." "The Sutherland lad," Blair barked, "is no longer a suspect." It was not an apology, but in Blair's language it was near poetry. Myrie Sutherland pressed one hand to her mouth. Jamie looked down at the mud, then at Hamish. "I still shouted at her," he said. "Aye," said Hamish. "You did. I wish I hadna. That is better than pretending you were right." Jamie nodded once. "It cost him something." Across the field, Moss crept nearer to Alastair's old dog. Roy allowed it with the weary tolerance of an elderly gentleman sharing a railway bench. Alastair did not command Moss. He merely sat on an upturned bucket and let the dog choose the distance. "That one will need time," Hamish said. "So will the village," said Mrs. Patel. The trial committee met beside the tea table, because nobody wanted to go indoors and call it formal. They agreed, after much throat-clearing, that future entries would include clear sale records, handler declarations, and welfare checks before competition day. Morag wrote this down with fierce satisfaction. "And no one person holds the run-order board alone," she added. "Aye," said Alastair. "Confusion should be shared fairly." That drew the first real laugh of the afternoon. Later, when the field began to empty, small acts of repair appeared without announcement. Someone carried Myrie's flask for her. Someone else told Jamie that Glenn had shown promise before the trouble. Catriona Gillies left a paper bag of eggs by Mrs. Patel's table, with no explanation except, "For whoever needs feeding." The Curry sisters watched Moss from a safe distance. "He looks smaller now," said Jessie. "No," said Nessie. "He looks like nobody is making him look large." Jessie considered this. "That is almost wise. I shall try not to repeat it." At Hamish's police station, the blue whistle cord and plastic fragments were sealed as evidence. The missing whistle itself would later be found caught in reeds below the burn crossing, cracked nearly through, its bright colour dulled by peat water. Blair claimed this discovery as if he had personally ordered the burn to give it up. Hamish let him. There were victories too small to defend and too tiresome to dispute. By evening, the wind dropped. The burn ran quieter, though not clear. Sheep grazed on the far field as if humans were weather. Noisy, temporary, and best endured until grass returned. Hamish stood by the gate with lugs at his side. The dog had acquired half a bridie from some admirer, and now looked prepared to forgive the entire justice system. Jamie came down the lane with Glenn limping lightly beside him. He stopped a few yards away. "Can I ask you something?" "Ah, yeah. Do you think he'll work right again?" Hamish looked at Glenn. The young dog leaned against Jamie's boot, not perfectly trained, not polished, not certain. But when Jamie lowered his hand, Glenn pressed his head into it. "If you stop trying to prove folk wrong," Hamish said, "and start listening to the dog, you've a chance." Jamie swallowed. "That sounds harder." "It usually is," Myrie called from the road. "Jamie, leave the constable in peace," Hamish said. "Your mother still thinks peace is possible." "That's a fine optimism." Jamie almost smiled. Then he walked on, slower than before, matching Glenn's uneven pace. The next morning, Hamish found a tin of oatcakes on Jamie's step, unsigned. By noon, 2 more had appeared, along with a small jar of liniment and a note in Jessie Curry's hand saying only, "For the dog," though nobody was fooled by that. At the police station, Hamish discovered his window box had somehow been entered in the side raffle and had lost to Mrs. Patel's Basil. He accepted this as justice. That night, Luggs slept with his nose tucked under his tail, full of stolen kindness. Sonsie appeared once on the wall beyond the window, carrying nothing, explaining nothing, and vanishing before Hamish could ask any foolish questions. The blue whistle remained in evidence. But Hamish remembered it less as an object than as a sound. Command cracked by fear, control pretending to be trust. Lochdubh kept its sheepdog trial. The applause sounded different for a while, and perhaps that was not the worst thing that could happen to a village. Lochdubh kept its sheepdog trial, but for a time people watched more carefully. Not only the dogs crossing the field, but the hands that commanded them, the voices that praised them, and the silences that followed shame. The blue whistle was meant to guide a working dog across grass and mud. Its cracked note became something else, a small, sharp reminder that control leaves a sound of its own when it has forgotten kindness. Obedience is not the same as trust. A person may command a dog, a committee, or a whole village for years, but fear is a poor foundation. It cracks eventually, and when it does, the truth may sound very small before everyone hears it. The kettle boiled. The sheep settled. Someone left oatcakes on Jamie's step without signing the tin. Luggs slept through the moral improvement, and Sonsie vanished into the heather as if all mysteries belonged partly to cats. When someone obeys perfectly, do you see discipline, or do you wonder what it cost? Thank you for returning to Lochdubh for When the Sheepdog Wouldn't Come. If this Highland mystery kept you listening, leave a quiet mark of support before you go. And when everyone blames the lad who lost his temper, Hamish listens for the note that should never have sounded.